ES Audio.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Dallaglio. Welcome to my rugby podcast. As always, I've got a fantastic, stellar lineup of guests who I'm delighted to welcome onto this week's pod to chat about all things rugby action from the weekend and much, much more. First up, it's Evening Standard's sports journalist Will Macpherson, who, other than delivering award-winning match reports and commentary, I'm sure has been walking around the corridors of Lord's Cricket Ground and enjoying the new era of English cricket, and we'll be hearing more from Will later on. Also joining us, when I say stellar guest, one that I'm a huge fan of, not just because he plays for Wasps or his son is called Enzo, but it is, of course, Jack Willis. Jack, lovely to have you on the show. And from Cherry Jam, a Gloucester rugby supporter, Ed Price, who spent most of his time shouting and screaming at Wasps and cheering very passionately for Gloucester. So welcome to you all. How are you all doing? I think I'm going to start with you, Will. Was I right in thinking you're at Lord's? Obviously, rugby being your main sport, but you do focus on the cricket as well.
Yeah, I had a lovely weekend at Lord's, thank you. But found time to watch quite a lot of rugby since the game finished early yesterday. Just early enough for everyone at Lord's to get a refund yesterday, which was quite nice.
Yeah, I noticed that. Joe Root was obviously getting a march on so that he could, win over fans.
He's a true man of the people, Joe Root. He's always looking out for fans.
And Jack, obviously you've had a busy weekend. We'll get on to the rugby side of it later, but hopefully you enjoyed the Jubilee celebrations.
Yeah, no, it was nice. Thank you. Got back and saw family, have a little catch up. So yeah, body's a little bit sore, but it was nice to have a little roast dinner with the family.
Brilliant. And Ed, I promise you, although I say those things in jest, Gloucester is a club that's very close to my heart. I think it's a superb rugby club. A lot of friends still down there, regardless of what happened over the years. How was your weekend? Obviously, we'll talk rugby in a second. Not quite made the playoffs, but I bet there's still a good feeling down there, isn't there?
Superb feeling. A brilliant weekend. Like Jack, it was spent with friends and family, and then obviously the rugby on Saturday was an excellent sort of finish to. From the Saturday point of view, they were selling jugs of Pimm's at King's Home on Saturday, Lawrence. I know. I'm shocked and appalled.
Well, they say the game's changing. I mean, there's evidence of it there. But look, we've got lots to talk about following another action-packed weekend. Obviously, the final regular season roundup of Premiership games. But I want to start by obviously having a chat with Jack. Jack, it's great to have you on the pod. I know you and I talk occasionally as well around some of the things that have been going on over the last couple of years. We'll get on to the Leicester Wasps game in a bit, but I am pleased to say that you did manage at least one win over the weekend, or so I've been told anyway, because you got first prize in your dog training, which at your local village fair. So basically, you lost the game, but you went home to pick up your rosette, did you?
Mate, I was very proud of my little dog Dash. I got egged on to do it by my family. We went down to the local fair. It was a Jubilee celebrations, and started to get a little bit competitive, even though it was sort of a few 7 or 8 year olds stood there with their dog. But you've got. So
what have you got your dog Dash? What is he? Top jackler or top ball carrier? What's his primary skill?
Keep away from rugby, mate. Yeah, don't want him getting hurt. So he's a few different tricks, bit of sit and stay, and a little spin and lie down, but. Yeah, blew the judges away, mate. So
what dog is Dash? What variety? They say most dogs look like their owners. So come on, give us an insight.
So yeah,
is he?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm cute as him, but he's I was very proud, mate.
Well, listen, well done to you. Getting straight down to business, as I am only too aware, you've had a fairly challenging 18 months or so. In fact, you've had a fairly challenging first half of your rugby career, if I'm honest. I mean, it's. Like most people, it's full of highs and lows. You've had to work really hard to come back from the second injury that you had in the Six Nations last year. I think in that time, you've become a father. Called your son Enzo, like my son, by the way, just so we're clear. So our careers are running in parallel here at the moment. So I'm thinking there's great things coming down the line for you, my friend.
I hope so.
But you're back in Eddie Jones's England training squad of about 900. So well done on that. And I think you're building up towards that game against the Barbarians. So listen, well done on all of that. But I think what our listeners and what a lot of people would like to know is, throughout all that time, and you had that double injury in the first place to your knee and your ankle, then you had the knee injury in the Six Nations. How have you managed to keep a positive mindset? And because there must be some really tough moments in that year and a half, right?
Yeah, well, I think the honest answer is you don't necessarily always keep a positive mindset. I think there's days where you quite literally have to drag yourself into the training ground, doing the same rehab session for the 20th time in the same room. No matter how incredible the facilities are at the training ground, you spend that much time in there doing rehab, it becomes pretty mundane. But for me, something that's always really been key is leaning on the people around me. I'm very lucky to have my brother at the club, so he's someone that I spend a lot of time with and lean on a lot. A few of the lads as well, and then mainly my girlfriend Megan has been incredible, as well as my family, listening to me moan away day in day out during my rehab, and a shoulder to cry on. Really, there was definitely some ups and downs, but I think one thing you never forget, no matter how long you're out for, is how much you love playing rugby. Yeah. I think even when you come back, it's sort of a realization on top of that how much you did love it. But I think deep down, you know that no matter how long this goes on for, I want to make sure I get back out on that pitch. And my mentality now, I feel like I'm definitely grateful for every minute I get out there. I think it definitely was tough the other week for one of our lads, Elliot Stook, bless him. He's been incredible for us all year and goes down and breaks his leg. And it's one of the first times I've actually been involved in a game where it wasn't me going off in a stretcher and seeing the other side of it. And bless him, it's a ruthless game, isn't it, rugby? You go off in a stretcher down the tunnel and you just don't know what awaits. I really, really felt for him, and he's been great for us this year. But you just have to try and refocus yourself into the rugby mindset, and it takes a little while.
And when you know you're going to be out for a long period of time, and just so listeners know, I mean, I sustained a similar injury to Jack, same surgeon, a little while ago. When you know you're going to be out for a long period of time, you talked about Megan and your home life. You've obviously had a boy, Enzo, which is a life-changing moment, regardless of any injury. Are you able to sort of try and switch off from having all of those distractions, if you like, nice distractions at home, do give you a slightly different perspective? I mean, I remember I used to come back from games, and my wife she's not into rugby in any way whatsoever. She was a creative artist. And she'd look at me and say, how'd it go? I said, yeah, pretty well. She goes, did you win? I said, yeah, we won, because we always used to win in those days. So did you win? And I said, yeah. She said, you don't look like you won, because I'd have stitches down the front. She said, did you score a try? I said, no, I didn't score a try. And then she go, oh, you couldn't have played that well then. Yeah. Throw me one of the kids. But yeah. I think having had all those distractions for you, has that been a kind of a really good thing? Because you can hopefully switch off a little bit from that whole recovery, come back and not just, because everywhere you go, everyone's saying, how's the knee, when are you going to be back, questions, and you just don't want to hear that when you walk in the door, do you really?
No, it probably got harder and harder to go to games at the Rico and have those same questions. And there was a couple of points, especially around Christmas, probably a bit earlier, just before Christmas, in sort of early December, where I didn't know when I was going to be back. It got to a point where I was like, this isn't going to plan at the moment. I'm having a few hiccups. I don't really know the answer to it. So every time I got it, it hurt a little bit. But yeah, you're spot on with what you say. You get home, and it was a big turning point for my rehab, really. I think for the first, when I was struggling November, December time, I was getting home, and you just think about it 24/7. You lie there, you're sweeping your knee to check for swelling. It's sore, you're getting up, you're icing. Whereas just before Christmas, Enzo's born, and all of a sudden it's absolute mayhem. And we've, you complete distraction. You get in the door and you just want to look after him and say hello to him and help out where you can. And I think I'm not saying to anyone who's injured that you have to have a baby in order to keep a positive attitude, because believe me, there's other challenges as well, like no sleep. But he's been incredible for me and for Megan. It's just given us such a positive focus and a real motivation to get back out on the pitch.
Well, listen, it's brilliant. And listen, come on then, talk to me about Enzo, because that's my son's name. And I know that you know my Enzo very well. He thinks he was named after Enzo Ferrari, which clearly he wasn't. Or he thinks it's something to do with the Big Blue, if anyone's ever seen that Luc Besson classic. But actually he's named Enzo because my dad's Vincenzo, and very, very funnily, I'm Lorenzo, but don't let anyone down at the shed know that I'm Christian Lorenzo, because I think they'd have a field day. Why did you go for such a cool name, if you don't mind me asking?
So we watched a film called The Art of Racing in the Rain, which he names his golden retriever after Enzo Ferrari. So that's where it actually originates from. There's no Italian in my family. Unfortunately, I'm not very flary and cool.
You do realise he could be eligible to play for Italy with a name like that now. Enzo Willis.
Keep his options open, aren't we?
They'll pick up on anything. Well, listen, just going back to your injury. You were very brave, I think, to produce a documentary kind of road to recovery for your ACL injury. I think most of our listeners hopefully would have seen it, but there was sort of a series of short films, weren't they? Was it Reboot 2.0? I can't quite remember what really innovative name you gave it. But I mean, some people were quite curious about that. Obviously, you're of an age where the content and social media and all of that is kind of part and parcel of your life. But did you do that deliberately to help your recovery? I don't think you did it for commercial reasons. I think it was more just sort of cathartic, was it?
Yeah, I think when I sort of started it off, it kind of, I thought, you know what, I'm going to need something to motivate me a little bit differently this time for my rehab. I remember coming back from my first injury, and I think a lot of people don't understand what you go through when you get injured. They see you get wheeled off in a stretcher and then suddenly see you with a bib on coming off the bench 9 months later and think that you've just been sat at home. And I remember coming back from my first injury and people said, when I was coming back, this is for my first game back, they were like, have you been into training and seen the lads, or is it you just back? And I was like, do you genuinely think I've just been sat at home for 9 months? And for me, I was like, you know what? I want to show the ups and downs of rehab. The other side of it doesn't just affect me; it affects my girlfriend, my family, teammates around me. There's a whole sort of backstory to injuries. It's not just get the operation and sit and wait. There's a lot that goes through it mentally more than physically most of the time, and just wanted to show that other side to it, really. Yeah,
listen, it was fascinating, and I think, look, hopefully it becomes a source of inspiration for people who, dare I say it, might have to go through a similar journey that you have. Listen, you've been part of a fairly exclusive group of players who've been able to play alongside a sibling in the same rugby club, which is highly unusual. I mean, I guess the Curry brothers spring to mind, but you and your younger brother, Tom, made your Premiership debuts for Wasps. I'm not sure if you made them together or he made it a year after you, or
I think his first game was my first start, so I played a few games earlier on in the year before and stuff, but it was about a year.
Listen, I'm a massive fan of his as well as yours. I genuinely believe, I know there's lots of number 8s that we keep talking about, including yourself, but I think he's got every chance of progressing along that same path. I mean, obviously your brothers, that's never going to change, but playing together in the same team, does that make it even more competitive? How does it change the relationship between the two of you?
I think, in training, we certainly get pretty competitive. If we're put on opposition teams in training, we start to get quite niggly at each other. And
you remind him of who the older brother is, yeah?
Yeah, always make sure I dominate him. I've got to stay on top, don't I? From an early age, I made sure.
Tell him if he wants his pocket money back,
even though he is about 6 kilos heavier than I am and a few inches taller, but he still knows who's boss, I think. But mate, I feel very lucky to be able to play alongside him. I think there's a few moments that have stood out to me. One being obviously the Premiership final we played in a couple of years ago wasn't quite how we all pictured it with COVID and no fans being there. But to actually stand there on the pitch and take in the fact that we're playing in a Premiership final when maybe 7-8 years before that, we're sat down with our dad in the lounge, ready to watch a Premiership match, thinking, look how cool that is. Imagine being part of that. And you kind of need to take a step back to appreciate those moments. Yeah. And this year, the back row has been pretty competitive at Wasps as well. So every opportunity that him and I get to play together is one that we sort of cherish. And at Leicester at the weekend, I thought he went quite well, and hopefully going on to next season, we'll have a few more games together.
Yeah, listen, it's magnificent. I think that, you know, having the two of you in tandem there. Look, you've managed to get at least 3 England caps. I think I've got a terrible memory, so I hope I've got that right. And before your injury against the Italians in February, I know that you've worked your way back and you've been playing, you know, I think pretty solidly for Wasps. I mean, it doesn't help when Wasps aren't getting the results that you or they would want. But do you focus on that, or I mean, you're back in the training squad with Eddie Jones, which is brilliant news. And I thought he was quite quick to bring you back as soon as you were fit again, almost as a way of sort of saying, look, you know, you are back to where you deserve to be. Are you focusing on that, or, you know, getting your England jersey back, or I know you're too humble to say you're not. Or you are, sorry, but are you just taking it one step at a time? I mean, I used to send my mum into bat, really, and say, because I think the England coaches were more terrified of my mother than they were of anyone. Really. So she would be very quick to tell every England coach that, you know, what you really need to do is just, you know, put my son straight back in the team. And sure enough, about a week later, it generally worked. So, I mean, that could be, if it's not working for you, because everyone else seems to be very scared to tell Eddie Jones what to do. So maybe you need to send your mum in and she'll set them straight. But just going back to the question, are you kind of are you focused just on each Wasps game, or would you hope to be part of this Barbarians England team that plays against the Barbars?
Oh yeah, coming back from injury, I think the first couple of weeks I was like, just come through it and unscathed and enjoy it, play with a smile on your face, and then you play those first couple of games, and then you're right. I'm back to business now. I've got to start to try and perform. Yeah. So I knew all the different bits that I'm trying to focus on working on, and each game go after those areas, and hopefully slowly my sort of Jackal confidence will pick back up, which I feel like it
oh no, listen, anyone who's watched you play, I don't think there's any issues there. It's been phenomenal. Do you realistically, and this would be an interesting one for Wasps as well, because having spent most of the season getting you back fit, they're obviously keen to keep you fit. And, you know, we've just seen a number of players like Manu's dropped out of the England tour because he's got to have an operation. Henry Slade has just had an operation. I mean, is it realistic for you to go to Australia, or are you kind of going, whoa, hold on a minute. This is a proper conversation for my club, for me, for Eddie to have together and say, you know, given how long I've been out, should I be actually going the other side of the world and playing test rugby?
I mean, for me, if I was given that opportunity, I'd take it with both hands. The weird thing for me, the last week after the Leicester game, the weekend just gone, it felt like I've only just really got going. I've been out for so long, and to only play sort of the second half of the season or a bit less than that, I'm chomping at the bit for more, really. My knee's feeling good. My match fitness has got to keep improving. It's something I've got to keep chasing. When you're out for that long, it doesn't just come back after a few games. So for me, if I was lucky enough to be invited on tour, I would take the opportunity with both hands. But yeah, I've got an opportunity at the mini camp this week to try and impress, and that's sort of as far as I'd look into the future for now. It's just about taking each session as it comes.
Well, I think Eddie Jones needs all the help he can get when he goes out there, because there's clearly one or two players who aren't going to be available. So just talking of Eddie, I mean, obviously, you know, rugby fans, you know, have got different ideas of because they read what's reported, they don't get to see the guy up close. I mean, do you, as a player, have a good? I mean, does he phone you regularly? I mean, I'm like to think, you know, whilst you're unavailable, he still might pick up the phone every now and again and say, how's the rehab going? You know, hope it goes well. You know, he was obviously picks up the phone to invite you back into the camp. Is there, you know, you're back on the WhatsApp group, I'm assuming. How does the relationship work without giving away anything that might upset anyone?
Yeah, and I had a couple of check-ins from Eddie, which was really nice of him during my rehab. But obviously, the main focus is the squad that are going into any of the major tournaments. And for me, I knew I just needed to focus on getting the knee right and try and get back into the frame. But yeah, Eddie's been great. Any opportunity I get, I'm very grateful for, and they've got an incredible setup there, and you learn heaps. So I just want to be part of that as much as I can, really.
Okay, and do you tell him where you want to play, or does he tell you where you want to play? I mean, just say, look, I know you want me to play 8, Eddie, but I'm a much better 6. Do you know what I mean? So move that bloke across to 8.
Beggars can't be choosers, mate. Beggars can't be choosers.
Well, listen, I know once you get more than 10 caps, you can start telling him what to do. All right. So, listen, just finally, before guys, Ed and Will, please feel free to ask Jack any questions if you want to chime in, because they'll be a lot better than the ones I've asked him. I know you missed out on the Champions Cup for Wasps. You're finishing 9th. You probably blew it against London Irish, if I'm honest with you. I nearly broke my TV watching that game. It's been a tough season for you guys, with a lot of injuries across the whole squad, yourself included. Just give us a quick idea about what the mood's like in the camp. I would imagine we got 2 big tight heads coming next season, so as a back row forward, the mood must be quite good, isn't it?
Yeah, look, we've lost a lot of players at the end of this season. A lot of lads out of contract moving on, and some big players within that, which is always a shame. But with the salary cap squeeze now at the moment, the way it is, it's always going to be the case. You can't hold as big a squad as you used to be able to. We've made a couple of great signings that will be really exciting. As you say, a couple of great tight heads coming in, and that'll be interesting to see how they go. And for us, I mean, I was really disappointed at the weekend to not get more out of the game. I think we let in a really soft try first phase, the first 10, 15 minutes. I can't remember quite exactly how early on it was, but I think we could have put a better account of ourselves out there to finish the season. I genuinely believed that we let ourselves down and lost that game rather than Leicester going to win it. In my opinion, I think we showed some real dominance in a lot of areas, and then
you certainly played well up front. I'd have been having some serious words with the back line, just saying, guys, we're playing well here, and you're butchering everything. sort your shit out, otherwise we're not going to give you the ball anymore. But anyway, listen, I won't dwell too much on that. Ed, please chime in if you've got a quick question for Jack, and Will the same.
Yeah, so Jack, I mean, the question from me, I suppose, is you mentioned actually about salary cap, the reduction in salary cap and the pressure now on the players. There's a lot of players that have gone out of contract and are struggling to get clubs. Is that something that's starting to creep into conversations between in the squad, that there's a lot of pressure on you guys now? Injuries like yourself, you've had a bit of luck in the way where your injury came in a time of the year or a time of the season, etc., where it wasn't a crucial time. You got a bit left on your contract. Is that something that's developing in conversations you're having with the other players within the squad?
I think it's not something that we necessarily chat about too much within the playing group. I think everyone's aware of it. I'd imagine for some clubs, there's a frustration with trying to manage the salary cap with everything. You're trying to manage a squad that used to get paid a certain amount and now pay it this amount. And with you look at sort of how the European competitions have gone, with sort of France with an unlimited salary cap. I'm not sure that's quite the way to go either, but there's always got to be a bit of a balance, hasn't there? So as a player, you've just got to make sure you're doing your all, giving your all to try and perform and keep the clubs interested. But we're definitely seeing now a lot more players that 3 years ago would have been given another contract that are now, unfortunately, the way the squads have been squeezed, they're having to move on. And it really is quite sad to see, in all honesty, because there's players that genuinely, in my opinion, would deserve another contract, and probably in the club's opinion deserve another contract, but they just don't have the money for it.
And that probably plays into the other question around the Championship League, because there's there isn't necessarily the depth in our Championship for those players who are very good quality players to drop down and start, because those players are going to be required again at some stage. But that's another conversation. Will, before we move on to the weekend's rugby action, quick question from you.
Yeah, Jack, I was wondering whether you felt like this has been the kind of most difficult and competitive Premiership season since you've been involved at Wasps. I mean, you look at the table and Wasps finished 9th, but I think you're about as far off in terms of points, similar distance from 4th to 10th. There's been that logjam of teams that have all been in the mix for Champions Cup. You've obviously missed out, but also not that long ago, you would have had playoff ambitions as well. So is that how it's felt to you?
Oh, definitely. I think a few years, well, when I first started, there'd probably be 2 or 3 games in a season where you could go, yeah, we're going to be coming away with 5 points here. There's not one game where, whether you're home or away now, where you're like, we're definitely getting 5 points. It's just not the way it's been. I think everyone's got such a competitive squad. There's so many games to play that teams have to manage their squads as well throughout a season. And I think, yeah, you're definitely seeing one of the most competitive years of rugby that I think we've ever seen. And as you say, it was crazy a few weeks ago. You're going back and going, right, if we win this weekend, we're in the top 4. If we lose, we're 10th or not 9th or 10th. You're thinking, how can that actually happen? But it breeds some exciting rugby to watch, doesn't it?
Well, listen, Jack, totally agree with you on that front. And listen, I'm sure I speak on behalf of you, just wrapping up our own little interview. We wish you all the very best for Barbarians build up. Let's hope you get picked. And obviously the selection to Australia, where all England fans will be rooting for you and keeping a very close eye on that. So, okay, listen, we're gonna turn our attentions to the results at the weekend. And I think, Ed, if it's okay, I'll start with you down at Kingsholm. I mean, it's got quite a distinct Wasp feel to it as well, doesn't it, really? George Skivington, ex-Wasp player, said he wanted to finish the season on a high and say thank you to the Gloucester fans. I mean, obviously, there has been that reconnection with the shed and with the Gloucester fans and the community. And there's no doubt that he's building something pretty special there. But I think given that 5 weeks ago, you had the opportunity to win 3 trophies and then you've ended up with nothing. Is there a sense of slight anticlimax that you haven't managed to make the playoffs?
Yeah, I think the playoffs, certainly, that we always knew that the Challenge Cup and the Premiership Cup were always going to be a bit of a struggle. I think clearly Worcester targeted it, and in the Premiership Cup, and fair play, that's their first major trophy, so you've got to give them credit for that. The Challenge Cup was always going to be a struggle. We got taught a lesson. The club got, I've spoken to a couple of the players subsequently, and they know they got taught a bit of a lesson against Sarries. They were a much better side than us on the day, and we really, really struggled. The key defeats, really, the key games in the last couple of weeks was Bristol away, losing a lead in the last seconds, and then obviously the second half performance against Quinn. So George Skivington was entirely right. Ending the season on a real high, there was always that possibility that Newcastle could do us a favour. Unfortunately not. But finishing 5th, when you consider where we were this time last year, it's a huge improvement. And you mentioned the reconnection with the shed and the club. I mean, a lot of it has to do with George Skivington. And we on the pod, we were a little bit hesitant, and the results weren't going our way. And there was some big hammerings in there as well. And I think sometimes, we have to own up, and we have to say we probably judged it a bit too soon. And the way that they've gone about their business this year, first of all, from that driving maul and the pack really exerting a lot of influence. And I know Jack will probably have felt this as well. Although actually, interestingly, Wasps were one of the very few clubs who really did stop our driving maul down at Kingsholm. So got to give them a bit of credit there. But the driving maul early part of the season, but what's been really, really pleasing has been the development over the last few weeks of the back play and some fantastic tries. So we're all very much of the opinion that, yes, it would have been wonderful to get into that top 4. I think the gap between the top 3 and the rest is quite significant. Yeah. So it would have been a real achievement, probably even to get to the final. But for 5th, I think this year, Champions Cup rugby next year. I think really that's probably where we all thought that would be a really good end of the season for us.
And I think what people have to appreciate is that, when you take over a squad as a coach, a new coaching group, to recalibrate that squad in the current financial salary cap restraints, you can't wave a magic wand and suddenly turn your team around. There are players there when George first came in that he probably thought would not be part of Gloucester's future. And there are players who are playing elsewhere that he wants to bring into the club. it looked to me like you had a lot of players in the back line, who are high-profile players. But if you can't win any ball, then there's no point in having those kind of players. So I think it does take a bit of time to recalibrate and rebalance that team. He's been there 2 seasons now, and I think when he gets the opportunity to maybe add 1 or 2 players within the cap into what is already an incredibly talented squad with young academy players, then I think you can start to mount a serious challenge on the teams above you. That kind of thing doesn't happen overnight. But listen, I think I would agree with you. I think Gloucester are going very, very well indeed. Will, Harlequins, a bit of a funny old game against Exeter. They couldn't improve their position as third, but they certainly weren't going to be overtaken. Toby Matson decided to go kind of pretty full ball, really, with a strong side, given that he felt he needed that kind of game before they go on and take Saracens at the StoneX. Do you think they just put that one to one side? There was some cracking try scored, by the way. I mean, not least the one involving Marcus Smith and Lewis Liner. But how do you see Quins going into the semi-final?
Yeah, I enjoyed Don Brandt's little nudge as well through for that late try. It was a good game, replay of last year's final, which was obviously pretty traumatic as well. Quins, we're talking about the Gloucester Sarries game. Quins and Sarries have taken totally different approaches ahead of this week's playoff. Sarries rested everyone. I think we're probably expecting at least 14, maybe 15 changes from them going into this Quins game, whereas Quins, as you say, put out the big guns that all the England players were playing. I don't think that defeat will mean a great deal to them. I think that was part of the problem with this weekend, actually, that not that many games really mattered or affected the position in the table because there's no relegation this year. And because, as Ed said, Newcastle might have done Gloucester a favour, but given league positions, I don't think too many people are expecting that. So, I don't think it'll have too much bearing on next weekend's playoff. But that is such a hard task for Quins going up to Sarries.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Jack, we won't. You mentioned Wasps and your frustrations. Just maybe as you were the last team or the last player to play against Leicester, give us a perspective on Leicester Tigers, because we all know that the turnaround under Steve and all his coaching staff, Kevin Sinfield, Wigglesworth, etc., has been extraordinary. But I think they've completed a clean sweep of home victories at Mattioli Welford Road, and they've been pretty impressive this year. What, as an opponent of theirs, where do you see the main improvements in their game other than everywhere?
I think they've gone back to the sort of traditional mindset of Leicester Tigers up front. I think set piece was a massive focus for them. I think going into the weekend before they played us, they'd scored 16 maul tries this season, which is pretty impressive. It sets a real tone going into games. They've got a decent scrum, but I think for us, we knew if we could match them there in that area and try and dominate up there, then what do they go to next was our challenge that we sort of set as a group. But they kick a hell of a lot. I think they kick more than anyone else in the league, and they're good at it. They've got some great kickers in George Ford, Ben Youngs, Wigglesworth, Van Poorfleet as well, and I think they've got some great guys in the air with the likes of Freddie Stewart going after it, and that certainly felt like the way they wanted to play against us was send it up into the sky with 2 or 3 of them charging after it, and put as much pressure on our back three as possible, with the fans at Welford Road adding to that with making a bit of noise. And yeah, it's going to be a challenge for Northampton to go there and come away with it. But they play very different brands of rugby. So sometimes, a bit like with that Saracens and Quins match, you'd hope that it'll be one to watch for sure.
And Will, the whole thorny issue of relegation or lack of it has been on the agenda all season. I mean, I looked at the table before kickoff of all the games; they all kicked off at the same time, and you were sort of thinking, "Wow, can you imagine if there was a bit of relegation jeopardy here?" I think there was 3. Well, certainly Worcester and Bath were Newcastle also in the equation as well. So
they were, yeah.
It just would have been. I mean, you wouldn't wish relegation on any club, but Wasps were 1 bonus point away from being relegated years ago. We've had some big names relegated. I think I think Ed, Gloucester and Wasps are one of the two clubs, or one of a number of clubs who haven't been relegated from the Premiership. So that's a good record to have. But I mean, obviously Worcester, Bath and Newcastle were all in the mix. It's not really a talking point in the sense that nothing happened, but it would have created drama at both ends of the table. We've seen it in Premiership football. Instead, I think Worcester scored 6 tries. What was quite funny is I was sat in the studio thinking Worcester were about to do a lap of honour at the end of the game to show off their Premiership trophy, Premiership Cup trophy, but they could actually finish bottom of the table. I mean, is that kind of is that allowed these days to do a lap of honour with a trophy if you finish bottom? That feels a bit strange. And I guess for Bath, I mean, they'd just be delighted that the season's over.
Absolutely, I think. Saturday was the 14th time in 30 games this season that they've conceded more than 40 points, which is incredible. And they were in a good position in that game. I know they're away from home, but I think they're 10 points up with half an hour to go, and they ended up losing by 16 points. There's obviously been some pretty well documented things going on behind the scenes, and they've got new coaching setup coming in, rearranged things. Ed Griffiths has left the club. But yeah, you look at the side and you look at the England training squad that Eddie Jones named today, which obviously included Jack, but and I know it doesn't contain any players from the top 4, but there's so many Bath players in there. There's so much talent at the club, especially young backs.
Yeah, but I mean, I struggle with that. I can't understand how you can get into an England squad if your team's losing every week. Doesn't really work for me. I mean, you're arriving into training camp with a losing mindset. So your job as an England coach is to really turn that around. But hey-ho, that's just my point of view. I don't mind 1 or 2, but if you're down the bottom of the table, you're doing something outstandingly well to be included in an England squad. That's for sure.
Yeah, and just as I say, the sheer number of them who have made it must be an indication that there's a lot of talent at the club, and I think there's a lot of young backs that we're kind of learning a lot more about each week, and they seem like really good players. But so the only way is up, literally. Yeah. But the season, as you said, couldn't come soon. At the end of it, couldn't come soon.
Well, it'd be fascinating. Obviously, Steve Diamond taking over at Worcester, Dean Richards stepping down at Newcastle, allowing Dave Walder to take centre stage, and Van Graham coming over from Munster. I wonder how much Bath fans are looking forward to the style of rugby that they're going to play with those outstanding players. But we'll discuss that another time. We are going to preview the semi-finals at the end of the pod. But just very quickly, it's time for our outstanding section where we ask all of our panel to decide who they think was the outstanding player of the weekend, or personality or coach or character. It doesn't have to be a player. Like an outstanding pint of London pride. Ed, I guess you're sticking to... loyally to Gloucester, or maybe not. Maybe you're breaking from tradition, but we'll start with you as our guest. Is it a Gloucester player?
It is a Gloucester player, and it's quite a hard one because there's about 3 of them I could have picked. But I'm going to go with the choice of the Gloucester fans on the day, and that's Santi Carreras, fullback for Gloucester on Saturday. He's been superb all season, and I thought his performance on Saturday is probably his best performance in a Gloucester shirt. He was just everywhere, and there's the try of the season. It should be Jamal Ford-Robinson, but we'll gloss over that. But the try of the season should definitely be Louis Rees-Zammit chasing a kick from Geordie Reid. But the work that Santi Carreras does in making the tackle, getting up, stripping the ball, then offloading. I mean, he's just a brilliant player.
And did you play in the forwards or the backs yourself, my friend?
Oh, definitely a back. Yeah. Winger, a failed winger broken spectacularally in a charity game. So
I could sense that there was no bias, of course, in that selection, but very well deserved. Jack, often it doesn't have to be from the game that you played in. I mean, I guess you'll put a big hand up for Jimmy Gopperth, signalling the end of his a long and illustrious spell at Wasps, and very successful spell at Wasps, and ironically being handed over to Leicester Tigers as their player coach.
Yeah, it's going to be a real shame to see guys like that leave. Jimmy is an absolute legend of a bloke. We all know what he offers on the field, but I think a lot of it is not seen behind the scenes. He's just a top guy, ultra positive, brings so much energy, and I just don't know how he's still trucking around at the age he is. But I think, it's only an aspiration for all of us as younger players to do what he's done. That's for sure.
And have you picked out anyone other than Jimmy that I sort of force fed you there, or is there any?
I think for me, watching the bits and bobs from the weekend, I think going into the semi-finals, Rory Hutchison is going to be key for Northampton. He's so elusive and is instrumental in their attack. And I think if they're going to stand a chance against Tigers, he's going to be a big part of that. And I think he did well at the weekend. It'll be exciting to see how he goes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Strange that your man Gregor doesn't seem to fancy him at the moment for Scotland. It seems very, very strange. But as you say, if you start doing it in the big games, even the coaches can't ignore that. I am going to sort of have a break from tradition and not necessarily pick a player outright, but I think we need to raise a glass of pride to Dean Richards, who brought the curtain down on a very long, illustrious, successful, sometimes controversial Premiership career as a DOR, having been a player at Leicester, iconic player who smashed me in the face and broke my nose in the first game I ever played at Welford Road when I was caught ball watching at a line out, and taught me a lot really about rugby, and then bought me a pint afterwards, and I was playing for England about a year later with him. So anyway, that and then went on to be very successful as a coach for Leicester Tigers, and then of course at Harlequins, latterly at Newcastle, and it's sort of end of an era really. So I think I raise a glass to him as the outstanding personality across the weekend. And a little word from poor old hooker McGuigan at Newcastle, who was doing one for the forwards there and was in line to be the top try scorer. I think he scored 15 tries, which is a phenomenal effort for a hooker, given that Newcastle have only won 6 games and they've lost the remainder. So, and then to have had the penalty try not awarded to him, it was a penalty try. Then he was substituted, and Blaine-Meyer, who goes on, who plays in his position, scores the try, and then he watches Max Malins overtake him. So I think he deserves a little glass as being outstanding. So well done to Dean Richards and to Newcastle. Will, if you bring it down on us, who was your outstanding? I mean, other than Joe Root. Who are you actually going to select?
I'm going to stick with the kind of lifetime achievement theme. We've got a couple of England back row forwards who could play 6, 7 or 8 on the pod. Tom Wood was another of them. He didn't play at the weekend, obviously, but he's retiring from Northampton duty. He's been an unbelievable servant for them. He's a very good player for England, won 50 caps, captained England. And just, I always found him one of the best players to talk to. He's always got something interesting to say. Gave a couple of good interviews last week. So my outstanding player this week is Tom Wood. Well done,
listen, well done to you all. They are all outstanding players, and we shall raise a pint of pride to them all. Ed, it's time now for a bit more of your podcast. Just I know that we've been waffling on, but Cherry Jam, I'm always fascinated to know why you guys get into it as a sort of a little hobby, I suppose. Probably like I got into rugby, really. You just sort of turn up and think, oh, this is quite good fun. But it's hosted by yourself and 4 other Gloucester's fans. So give us a bit of an insight. When did you start making it? I presume you're a lifelong season ticket holder. And I guess what's been the highlight on your pod so far, other than chatting to Jack Willis and myself and Will? What's been the highlight on your own particular pod?
Well, I was going to say this is a particular highlight for me, for someone who, 2 years ago, I was on furlough like so many others, and all the jobs, I think most of the jobs have been done in the house. My wife might disagree, at that exact moment, we'd lost our head coach, our director of rugby, loads of players were leaving. And I suggested to the other lads, my mates, should we collectivise our pain and sort of talk about this and see if people are interested? And surprising to everyone, that we get a couple of 100 people, 300 people listening a week, which is far exceeding what we thought we would get. It kind of started from there, really. I mean, the majority of the first part of the pod, I have to be honest, is for the first year was the most depressing listen in rugby history. It really was. I kind of mentioned it earlier, and bless him, George Givington and Don Waldock, crikey, they got some stick. But what's been really, really good is you could hear it as the games have started turning into wins. Our numbers start to increase. It's amazing. People like to listen to positive stuff rather than 5 blokes moaning. And we've had some great things. I managed to talk to Mike Tyndall, who you'll know very well, Lawrence, and
his stock rises every week, doesn't it, with the royal family?
I'll tell you what,
he could be king quite soon.
He's got the vote in Gloucester, and then I managed to get another positive this year. Got to talk to Jamal Ford Robinson, who is just a lovely guy. He turns out he lives around the corner from me, which is even funnier. But a really nice guy and a real character and a big cult hero at Gloucester. But I think I can't really underplay this. The best moment of the pod so far was the week after, or the weekend recording after the 64-0 against Bath. Genuinely, sometimes it's quite challenging to get all the lads on for a pod recording. That wasn't. I was getting texts saying, right, when are we recording? Can we record tonight? I think we were thinking probably not a good idea, as a few of us had a few beers. So that was by far the most positive podcast recording. And it's been generally a really lovely experience. And I meet people when I'm out and watching the games, and I've been a season ticket holder for 26, 27 years now. I meet people, we talk about the pod, and they, that's you, is it? There's normally a bit of abuse directed my way, and then you just talk about rugby, and it's great.
Are you, and who would be your dream guest? I'm thinking Mike Teague or something like that. Do you get some of the old Gloucester legends to come on and give a real perspective on how they look at the new Gloucester and what they think of the way that rugby's played now?
We've asked them. Hopefully this will help in getting them on. But I think, to be fair, the one that we all would love to chat to, because he was the player of our generation watching, was James Simpson-Daniel. He's, for me, the greatest player to ever play in cherry and white.
No, don't mention he turned me inside out 6 times.
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to mention it, but I wasn't there that day. I was at university. I was watching in a pub in Swansea, screaming my head off.
Whenever they ask for the Premiership try of the season, that one always comes out, and then I have to sort of show them a picture of me picking up the trophy seven days later.
I was going to say, to be fair, you do every single time. You can always beat us on that one. You won the game, so that's.
I said to Sinbad, if you can't rinse a 35-year-old who's had 2 ACL reconstructions, mate, you've got no chance, have you, really? So well done to him. But listen, it was brilliant. We wish you all the very best with the pod. It's a great listen. And Cherry Jam, I like the name of that. That's got it's got some legs to it, I think, Ed. So and if you ever want any outside perspective, please feel free. And I'm sure it'd be very refreshing. I'm actually a guest on James Haskell and Mike Tyndall's pod this weekend, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. The rugby, isn't it? The good, the bad, and the rugby. And I said to Hask, the idea of a pod is that if you invite guests on, you have to let them talk. So I think he's still working on that, by the way. But listen, excuse me, a bit of a frog in my throat. We're going to go to our over the line or in the bin, which is our very creative quiz that we have. It's only one question, and it's trivia time. I'm sure everyone's been waiting for it. And Will, it's over to you just to give a quick explanation. I think we'll let all of our guests, including myself, take part in this, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lawrence. For Ed and Jack's benefit, basically each week I give Lawrence and his guests a piece of rugby-related trivia, and you simply have to decide if you think it's true and therefore over the line, or false and therefore in the bin. This week we got a bit of a step back in time, but it is Wasps related. The RFU was founded in 1871. However, Wasps were not one of the original 21 clubs. And this is because the club's delegate attended the wrong pub and missed the meeting. Is this over the line or true, or in the bin and false? Ed, as you're our non-Wasps representative, so I'll come to you first. What do you reckon, over the line or in the bin?
I'm sure there is definitely there's definitely a story out there about one club missing. And I've got a feeling it is Wasps. So I'm going to say it's over the line.
Jack, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree with. I'm trying to do the maths quickly because we had our 150th anniversary. I'm not that good at maths, but I'm going to say over the line as well. I think it lines up.
Yeah, and I think that I will concur with that. I don't think Wasps were the only club. I think there might have been one other, but it's not. It doesn't surprise you, does it? I mean, we've had no idea what we're doing. No training ground, no stadium. Where do we turn up? Oh, let's just go to the pub. I mean, it's very in keeping with with Wasps. So I think I'm going to go, Will, over the line and suggest that we were the last club to join the RFU. And actually, we were the last club to get a professional owner as well. When everyone was running around being bought up by Nigel Ray and all these various other owners, we're going, Christ alive, no one wants to buy Wasps. We're like the last bloke in the in the playground, really. But it all worked out okay in the end. Chris Wright came in and goes, yeah, I've got a quid in my pocket. There you go. But I'd say over the line for Wasps being late to the RFU party.
You are all correct. It is over the line. But the meeting was held at the Pall Mall restaurant in London, and allegedly the Wasps representative went to the wrong venue, and by the time he realised his mistake, he was too drunk to make his way to the correct place. I'm not sure if this might explain anything that's happened since in the game of rugby, but there you go.
Well, there you go. It's probably taken that long for the RFU to come up with a decision, to be fair. But listen, we are very grateful for that wonderful piece of rugby trivia. Treasure that, everyone, your listeners. We're going to go draw the curtain down on our semi-final preview. Only 2 more weeks of the Gallagher Premiership season left. Of course, the playoffs and the final. Let's take a look ahead to next weekend's Premiership semi-finals. Northampton. I mean, it's actually thrown up 2 quite contrasting games, interesting games, 2 derbies. And Northampton will be heading to Leicester for a East Midlands derby. And Quinn's obviously facing Saracens at the Stonex in a London derby. So some nice parallels there. I listened to an interview from Chris Boyd, and going back to what Jack was saying, I thought Wasps acquitted themselves pretty well, actually. That was a strong Leicester side. And, if they'd have taken some opportunities in the 22, they could have easily come out the right side of that. Chris Boyd was interviewed after the game, and Northampton are probably one of the best. They play a very positive brand of rugby, as Jack's already alluded to, very different to maybe in style, in terms, not necessarily in effectiveness, but the 2 times that they've tried to go to Welford Road this season, they've been well beaten. And there's always a view, and I don't mean this brutally to Saints fans, but they play some of the best rugby in the Premiership. Ball in hand, they are superb. But there's always a feeling, if you're playing against them, that you would say there's a bit of a soft underbelly there. And if you can get stuck into their tight 5 and you can really be physical, in the same way as probably Leicester tried to be against Wasps, but were matched, I think that they've come unstuck, and it's all very well having really good players 9 to 15, but if you get bashed up front, you're not going to win the game. So I think, Ed, as a neutral, I'll let you impart your view on that, because you see Leicester and Northampton. Chris Boyd basically said, reminded his players that they need to front up, otherwise we're not going to win. Would you concur with that? And can you give them a chance of winning? Because they are a very skillful side, but then again, Leicester have unbeaten at home all season.
Yeah, I can certainly see a Northampton getting a win, but I think Leicester would have to drop off their standard performance to get to that, for that to happen. I mean, Leicester are the only team really, I think, probably other than, to be fair, I think Exeter in the league, I'm talking about Exeter and Wasps, who kind of really bullied Gloucester this season. And Northampton, I felt when we played them in the league and we played them in the Challenge Cup, you mentioned there about the soft underbelly. Gloucester did get into them pretty quickly and put them under pressure. If Northampton can be in and about the game in sort of 65 minutes, I'd give them a chance, because against Saracens, I mean, they tore them apart the last 5-10 minutes just to get some bonus points, which pretty much kept them in the top 4. I think it's really dependent. If Leicester can open up a lead like 8, 9, 10 points into the last 10-15 minutes, I think that's it.
I agree with that. I just think, I don't know whether players look at this anymore, or coaches, but Leicester are back to their best, or certainly close to their best. And when the Welford Road is packed and you've got a referee who's refereeing there, you've got to be very clear about the way you're going to play the game, because, I spent a long time along with Alex King and a number of other people analysing why we never used to get results up at Welford Road. And you've got to play, particularly in the second half, with 24,000 people screaming. All the decisions go with the home team. I'm telling you that for a fact. And you have to make sure you play in the right areas of the field. And we had a lot of success against Leicester as a Wasps player in Premiership finals. But you know what? We kicked the ball more against Leicester than we did against any other team. Because if you get caught in the wrong areas of the field, you just get hammered at the breakdown. You get hammered by the referee. And Northampton can win, but if they go there with their game that they've currently got, and they don't kick the ball, they're not going to win. You know, they're going to get bashed up. So that would be my very insightful delivery of what might happen. Let's go to the other game, Will. You're probably brave enough to make a call. It's going to be tough. Saracens look very strong. Obviously, Quins have got a number of stars in their side. Marler, Smith, Dombrand, Kerr, all going very, very well. Some brilliant young players. Lewis Liner, Murley, who's been going well. Esterhazen, best player of the season. But Saracens seem to have an answer for everything this season.
Yeah, you're right. This is also, it's worth noting, this is a proper grudge match now. I mean, I think it's Quins and Exeter who've really hung on to what went on with Saracens a couple of years ago. They're the two teams you still hear talking about it.
Yeah. Even though Wasps were robbed of a European Cup, a European final position because they brought all their British Lions off the bench and blew us away in the second half. But we won't mention that. Go on.
I don't think Sarries are. I don't think they've got the depth, and I think we saw that a little bit on Saturday. I don't think they've got the pure depth that they had before everything that went on with the relegation. But they're still that 15, that 23 is still formidable. I see both games as a little bit kind of, to be really simplistic, Roundhead Cavalier this weekend. And I as much as I'd love the Cavaliers to win, I think both sets of Roundheads are going to win. Leicester have been the first team to be top of the table from the start to the finish of a Premiership season, which is amazing when you consider the league is longer now than it was. And Saracens, although I think Quins are a better side than when they won it a year ago, I think Saracens are just going to be too strong for them.
And Jack, if you give us a player's perspective, because you played in big games, if you're playing against any side in a Premiership, in a big knockout game at home, it doesn't matter who they are, you'll respect them clearly, but you do expect to win those games, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. And I think Saracens at the Stonex are a big challenge. They'll always be tough to play against there. They're tough to play against anywhere. And I think they've got as you said there, Will, there's a lot of changes amongst their squad, but they've still got a strong 15 and into the 23 that have got a lot of experience in these big games. They've played a lot of these big games, had these big moments, experienced it before. Yes, Harlequins obviously have played in a couple in recent years for sure, but I do think it would be hard to look past Saracens at the weekend. And in my opinion, probably sort of going all the way.
Well done. No one's really sat on the fence there, unlike Ugo, who couldn't come up with the right answer when pressed. He said Northampton definitely off air, and as soon as he went on air, he said no, Leicester will definitely win. So well done for not sitting on the fence. That's all for this episode of the Rugby Podcast. I just want to say an enormous thanks to Jack, to Ed, to Will, Jack. All the very best for the week ahead with England. Don't be afraid to tell Eddie Jones where you want to play. I mean, he might not pick you there, but just say to him, listen, I'm a much better 6 than I am 8, so just let me play there. Listen, we'll see you all next time. I'll be back next week with a special episode looking forward to the Premiership final, and I hope you'll join me then. Thank you.